Well, good morning. Welcome to Debbie's Back Porch. So glad to have you with us. You know, I didn't have a garden last year, so I'm depending on the freezer section at the grocery store for many of my favorite vegetable dishes. So I cooked a vegetable plate for supper last night, and almost all of it came out of my freezer. I'm going to show you how I did some of that and made it taste like fresh summertime veggies. Here's my plate. Here are some purple hull peas I got from the freezer section at Walmart, and some frozen okra I got from the freezer section at Kroger. And I have back there Grandma Velma's fried corn, and I'll post the link to that video at the end of this one. And I froze it, cut it off the cob from corn I bought this summer. I added a couple of tomatoes from my garden and a cantaloupe and of course some cornbread. One of my favorite meals, and I'm going to show you how I cook frozen okra to taste just like summer fresh. So this is a little bag of frozen okra, and when I have a garden I freeze it myself and it's just the same, but this is just fine. I hit it on the counter to break it up a little bit. This would be, I guess, 4 normal servings, but I'll be real honest with you. It made 3, because who wants just a little bit of okra? And I'll talk to you about the carbs in making it this way too, because it's not as much as you think. So I put this in a colander, break it up just a little bit. It's still frozen hard, just took it right out of the freezer. And I'm going to spritz it with water just enough to separate it. I'll say again, I'm not going to thaw this out. I'm going to cook it frozen. You know, around the country when I lived as a girl, people just said you couldn't freeze okra. You couldn't freeze okra, it wouldn't be any good. And then people started cooking it and freezing it half cooked. And that was never really very good. The breading was never just right. So I started experimenting with this, and I like it, and I've served it, and I promise you people can't tell the difference. So I've salted it a little. I've got a half cup of flour here, and I'm probably going to use about half of it. I just want to see, I want to have enough to cover it well. Now the okra is wet, just wet with water. So the flour is going to stick, and I'm going to add flour and just turn it over and over until there's a fair amount of flour on each one. Now, I don't cook my okra like you might get it at some restaurants where it's individual little hard pellets. I cook it what I always think of as country style. And it's much lighter breading than what you get in a restaurant, and it's much fresher tasting than what you get at a restaurant. Now this is all-purpose flour, so you saw me salt the okra just a little bit. If I were using self-rising flour, which I have for years, I would not have salted it first. I have here some panko crumbs, and these are just crunchy little crumbs. You can use matzo meal, you can use a little bit of cracker crumbs, or you can use cornmeal. I don't like to bread things with cornmeal because I find that the little cornmeal the little grit from cornmeal burns and looks burnt before the okra is done. But a lot of people do like cornmeal on theirs. Just a little. A few tablespoons full. Just going to sprinkle it around. And you can cook this okra just fine without the added breadcrumbs. This just adds a tiny bit of crunch and variety in the bite. So my oil is on the stove heating. Right now it's on medium-low heat because I don't know exactly how long this is going to take, and I don't want it to be too hot when I put the okra in. And it will heat up very quickly when I get ready to actually add the okra. Now you can see this is what they say is 4 servings. My only goal in stirring this around is to make sure the kernels are all separate. Meet you at the stove. Now I don't want this oil too hot. I don't want it to brown right away when I drop the okra in it. but I do want it to start sizzling. So I've got it on medium heat, not too high, medium heat. And I'm going to put one in and see how long it takes it to sizzle. Now remember, this is frozen, and we've got a pretty good sizzle there. So I'm going to add the okra slowly. And slowly is important because you're putting frozen food into hot oil. Number one, it'll sizzle up. Number two, the okra itself takes the heat of the oil down. So we're going to keep an eye on how the oil sizzles. And you see we've got a nice slow sizzle there. And I realized I'm doing this with my fingers and that I probably shouldn't encourage you to do that because you might get burned. So I've got a slotted spoon here, and I'm going to add it just a little bit at a time. Watching for the sizzle the whole time. Now I'll tell you, if I'm cooking for a big crew, I would cook 2 or even 3 of those little packs. Like on Thanksgiving, I would cook 3 times this much for the whole table. And if you do that, then you need to do it in 3 batches. You don't want it piled up in the pan. So my sizzle has gone down a little bit, and the oil has cooled off a little beyond where I want it. So I'm going to wait just a minute before I add any more until everything in the pan starts sizzling. And that might mean adjusting the position of your pan on the heat. Now, I always cook in cast iron. I cook almost everything in cast iron. And they will tell you that cast iron conducts heat well. But well is a relative term, and cast iron really doesn't conduct heat well as many other metals. What it does is hold your heat and keep, once you get it to temperature, it stays at a nice constant temperature. So I'm starting to get sizzling all over the pan now, and I don't have a whole lot left to put in. But when I do, because once you put food in to fry, you're supposed to pretty much leave it alone till it browns. So when I move some of this around to make room for the last little bit, I'm going to do it very carefully. There you go. Try not to disturb it any more than you just have to. I think that's the last of it. And when you have a pan like this, and you see I've got something else on the back eye so it keeps me from moving the pan exactly where I'd like to, you move your cast iron pan around a little bit so that you get coverage. Now I'm going to show you how much of that half cup of flour is left. It didn't all stay on the okra. Some of it went right through. So what you ended up with in the pan is actually only about 1/4 cup of flour. And you split that 4 ways, and that's about 6 grams of carbs per serving, which is more than some people will eat, but not as much as you feared, I think. So I'm going to let this sit here undisturbed and move the pan around as I need to for about 7 minutes. It's not on a high heat. It's not going to burn in 7 minutes, but we're going to start to get a little brownness and a little crunchiness. And we're still on a medium to medium low heat, depending on your stove. And I think before I cut away, I want to show you adjusting the pan on the heat so that I get more even cooking all around the pan to even out the heat. So it's been actually about 8 minutes, and I'm getting ready to turn it because you can see browning around the outside of the pan. You don't see it on all of it, but we're going to turn it now and get both sides. But I'll take this opportunity to show you my corn. This is Grandma Velma's recipe, And I just put a stick of butter in that pan on low heat and put the actual frozen corn. I cut the bag away, put the frozen corn in, and let it cook slowly. And back here is my purple hull peas, and I just cooked those according to the directions on the bag, but I added a little bacon grease, and once they got almost done, I added a little salt. So I think that our okra is about ready now. It has actually fried close to 9 minutes, and I see some little brownness there. It doesn't have to cook this long on the other side. You won't do a perfect turn so that everything is exactly turned over. You're kind of stirring it up more than anything else and turning it. But you can see some of the little cuts are getting a nice brownness on them. And I don't know if you can hear the sort of rattling sound it makes from the crunchiness when you turn it. I've tried to leave the sound on, although the frying is kind of loud. So it is cooked on the other side only about 3 minutes. And you can see we've got some nice crunchiness here. Not too crunchy. Sometimes when I get okra in a restaurant, it's really kind of hard. This is still going to have a soft middle and a nice crunchy outside. And I'm going to take this up onto a paper towel. And when I'm taking up fried foods, I give the spatula or the spider that I take it out with. And I think I'm going to get my spider. I'll show you how much easier that is. But I kind of shake it a little bit to let some of the oil drain off. And then I put it on a paper towel and let it drain just a little bit. If it wasn't salty enough to suit you, if you salt it while it's still hot, the salt will adhere, but I think the salt I put on it to start with was just fine. So that's how I cook frozen okra. It's going to taste just like fresh okra. Yes, it will. I'll do another video later when I have some fresh okra on how to freeze it. But right now I'm going to put my plate together. I have a guest for supper tonight. This was a special meal for her because this is what she loves. And I'll take everything up and then we'll go on over here to the table. The cornbread's already done, and I have a video on how to make cornbread too. So I'll see you in a moment at the table. And this is my country vegetable dish. Almost everything out of the freezer. And I'm going to taste this okra because, you know, okra is one of my favorite things. There's almost never any leftover okra when I'm at the table. I'm sorry. I know that makes me sound like a pig, but I love fried okra. And I had from this meal enough for 3 more plates of peas and corn and 1 more with the okra. And I just put them in the freezer and I'll heat them in the microwave. The cornbread, by the way, I cut in little squares and freeze it individually in the freezer. And they are wonderful, just heated a little bit in the microwave for weeks. I've had it in the freezer for weeks. And a quick little hint is about this time of year, I usually start bagging up leftover cornbread for my Thanksgiving turkey dressing. I hope you try this meal. I hope you like it. I hope you learn to make full use of frozen food because they are as close to fresh in nutrition as anything you can buy. Thank you for joining us on Debbie's Back Porch. I hope to see you again tomorrow.